All right, moving on from the topic of attempted or discussed genocide against an entire group of Americans, let's talk about something slightly more convivial. And let's talk about Joe Biden. Did you know that per The Hill, that 60% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's job as president-elect? It's true. It says so right here. I'm actually looking at the headline right here on my computer screen, which is out of sight from the camera. Now, the funny thing about this is that there is no job of the president-elect. There's no position of the president-elect. It's a made-up title. It was a description at the very best. How you would describe someone who had been elected to the presidency but was waiting to actually take the oath of office. It was in 2008, actually, when Barack Obama won the presidency, that you started seeing the president-elect of the United States start to trend, because there were pictures, I remember this, in the newspapers before they all started going to pot, of Obama giving some speech here or some speech there, and he would have a seal, like the President of the United States, but it was a President-elect of the United States. And it was very clear that they were trying almost to set up almost this parallel system of government. They were trying to siphon power away from the actual presidency when they weren't in it, so that they could automatically start ruling before they had even taken the oath of office. Now, this headline, 60% approve of Biden's job as president-elect, of course, it means absolutely nothing, because like I just said, there is no position of the president-elect. There is no office, there is no position, there is no nothing. This is descriptions being turned into titles for the only purpose of actually, again, siphoning power from actual legitimate sources of power. This headline, in other words, shows exactly what Joe Biden's presidency is going to be. It's going to be nothing. It's going to be dead air in all the areas that actually matter when it comes to standing up to China and even confronting China, when it comes to, for example, maintaining American sovereignty, when it means, for example, standing with our allies, when it means, for example, working with our allies for the peace and security of the world without being the world's policeman. We've talked about that before with the oh my gosh, almost a year ago with my video I did about American Empire. But when it comes to, in all those areas, his administration is going to be just an air sandwich. There's not going to be anything there. But there is going to be something there. His administration is going to be very powerful and very consequential when it comes to other things. And to show you what I mean by that, did you know that Joe Biden, this past week, he tapped Pete Buttigieg to be the Secretary of Transportation? We all remember Pete Buttigieg, right? He was the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and then based on his 7 years as the mayor, he decided he could run for president. You remember that. He dropped out of the race right before Super Tuesday and kissed Joe Biden's ring. And so this very much seems to have the air of, okay, I dropped out of the race, I gave you my support, now it's time for you to pay what you owe me. So, Joe Biden nominated Pete Buttigieg to be his Secretary of Transportation, which in and of itself is ridiculous, because Pete Buttigieg has absolutely no experience with transportation, especially on the national scale. He, honest to goodness, gang was saying that, oh, he has all these connections to transportation because when he was a kid, he was fascinated with trains. He loved riding trains. And he, because don't you know, he's, gay, right? And he proposed to his quote-unquote husband in an airport terminal. Well, by God, I mean, sign that man up. He's obviously, undoubtedly an expert. Again, in all the things that actually matter in the real world, the Biden administration is going to be AWOL. But in the places, that doesn't really make sense. In the places where it doesn't matter, where the real world matters, the Biden administration is going to be AWOL. But in ideological matters, the Biden administration is going to be full front and center. Let me read you the tweet that Pete Buttigieg sent out December 15th when he accepted Joe Biden tapping him on the shoulder to be Secretary of Transportation, as if he didn't know that this was coming down the pipe. This is what Buttigieg said on Twitter. This is a moment of tremendous opportunity to create jobs, meet the climate challenge, and enhance equity for all. I'm honored that the president-elect has asked me to serve our nation as Secretary of Transportation. And there it is again, the president-elect, this description as if it was a title. But specifically to this tweet, did you notice? I mean, we have the usual rigmarole, the eye rolling, yeah, get on with it when he was talking about jobs and meeting the climate change. But did you notice where he said enhance equity for all? That is really the center of that tweet, gang. That is really the center. Because if you don't know, equity, it sounds like equality. It sounds really, really, really close to equality, but it's not equality. Now, Dr. James Lindsay, who is a sociologist, I've mentioned him several times before. You really should be following him on Twitter. He has dived deep into critical theories, critical race theory, critical gender theory, and all of their assorted bastard cousins. And on his website, newdiscourses.com, I will put a link in the description, he has the social justice dictionary where he takes all of these jargon words that they use, like white supremacy, white privilege, equity, climate justice, emotional justice, etc., etc., etc. And he actually defines what they mean by them. When it comes to equity, Dr. James Lindsay described equity as a form of social communism, where goods are redistributed not based on class, like in the old Marxist system where we were going to take from the bourgeoisie and give it to the proletariat, to the workers. No, here in the social justice, the critical theory crowd, equity means redistributing goods, yes, but redistributing them to atone for historical wrongs, what we might call historical sins, whether they are real or whether they are simply imagined, born out of the nightmare that is the critical theory worldview. So, for example, equity would mean paying paying reparations to black people for slavery, even though they themselves have never been slaves. Their fathers were never slaves, probably even their grandfathers, and their grandfathers weren't slaves. They might not even, have their family might have immigrated, 2 generations ago. They might never have even been enslaved. There might be absolutely no slaves in their family tree at all. But we still owe them reparations simply because of the fact that they're black. Okay? That would be one thing. That would be the redistribution of goods to atone for an actual historical wrong, because yeah, slavery actually did happen, it did exist. Retributing or compensating for wrongs just imagined out of the social justice mindset would be, for example, paying women reparations for the harm that has been caused to them, or the harm done to them because of the patriarchy, or saying no, you know what, men can no longer apply for these positions. No, from now on only women applicants will be accepted to these positions here, to atone for the fact that men have lorded it over women for generations and generations and generations. That would be an example of basically a made up harm. Okay? That is what equity is. So isn't it illuminating? Isn't it eye-opening that the man tapped to be the next Secretary of Transportation says that part of his job is to enhance equity for all? What the hell? Even if we accepted equity in its critical theory definition, what the hell? Seriously, what the hell would the Secretary of Transportation, the guy who loved playing with choo-choo trains when he was a kid, right? Because that's all the criteria you need anymore in our upside-down turn world where everything is topsy-turvy. What the hell would the Secretary of Transportation be doing with redistributing goods? How does making sure that the trains run on time and the planes, don't fall, crash, and burn because the wings fell off in mid-flight? What does any of that have to do with the redistribution of goods to atone for historical wrongs, real or imagined? The answer, give you a hint, starts with an N and it ends with an O. Or actually has, I ruined the joke. Starts with an N, has a thing in it. Nothing! Absolutely nothing! It has nothing to do with his job. That's what I meant when I said at the beginning, gang, that when it comes to the things that the real world is concerned about, issues of power, force between people and competing interests, the Biden administration is going to be a wall. But when it comes to ideological matters, it's going to be front and center, because the only reason why the Secretary of Transportation would even say that part of his job is to enhance equity for all is because he knows that he's not going to be really doing anything about transportation. His job is to enforce and solidify critical theory's new hierarchy onto the rest of society, to enforce it through government fiat. Pete Buttigieg that's what Pete Buttigieg basically admitted is going to be his job when he sent out that tweet. That's what it's going to be. And that's not just going to be for the Department of Transportation. That is going to be for every position in the Biden administration. Every position. It's not going to be about the actual position itself or the area of life that department, that cabinet position is supposed to overlook. It's going to be about the left's narrative, the left's worldview, the left's ideology, and just forcing it further down our throats in every single area of our lives. You won't even be able to take a plane trip, presuming that you actually will be able to again if this pandemic ever ends. You won't even be able to do that and escape from critical theory and from the left's narrative. And I've said this before, gang, here on the Rolling Stone when we were talking about Netflix's Babysitter Club series, where they were talking about transgenderism, when we talked about Disney's Short Out, which featured, don't you know, the first openly gay protagonist in a Disney Pixar. Sure, what a historical moment. Yay. I told you then, specifically in regards to children, that In school, out of school, the left is indoctrinating and reprogramming your kids. This is the same thing, except it's not just aimed at kids, it's aimed at all of us. It's aimed at all of society. No matter what area of life you try to escape to, there will be no escape. It's like Roman in a very bad but very, very amusing 1950s black and white sci-fi movie, Man-Made Monster, I think. Yeah, I think it was Man-Made Monster, Roman, which is basically a guy in a gorilla suit with a fishbowl kind of helmet with huge bunny ear antenna on it. Just Google Roman and you'll see what I'm talking about. But at one point in the movie, Roman says, of course, to the family, the protagonists, there is no escape. And that's what it is here. The left, in that sense, not to make light of this, but the left, in a sense, is Roman. There is no escape. And I've said it before, gang, and I will say it again. The only way to actually defeat this, is to completely overturn the system. Because make no mistake, you are not going to just be able to just stay neutral in this. You're not going to be able to stay neutral. You are not going to be able to abstain or anything, because if you do, you will be punished. And there was a great example of that too this week. San Francisco announced that it was going to rename a high school because it had been named after Abraham Lincoln. And don't you know, Abraham Lincoln didn't care enough about black lives. He didn't demonstrate sufficient care for black lives. What was interesting about that story, though, is that another school in San Francisco was also changing its name. This school had been named, for whatever reason, after Dianne Feinstein, a senator from California, who's one of whose major claims to fame is that her chauffeur for 20 years was a Chinese spy. So, you have Eric Swalwell banging Chinese spies, and then you have Dianne Feinstein being driven around by Chinese spies. I mean, they might as well just invite Chairman Xi to, bunk at the White House. He and Joe can share bunk beds or something. It would make everything a whole lot simpler. Just give him the nuclear codes and the right button. You know what? Be done with it, I say. But the school named after Dianne Feinstein in San Francisco is also changing its names because Dianne Feinstein hugged Lindsey Graham, was not sufficiently hostile to Amy Coney Barrett when she was nominated to the Supreme Court, and the left has just finally had it with her. And the left, when that was announced, the left actually was sending out a message. You either toe the line in every single circumstance, or you are erased from society. You have absolutely no place in the public square. That's why this is important, gang. Because there will be no escape from this critical theory. There's not going to be any escape from Commissar Comrade Buttigieg or any of his other compatriots, comrades at arms in the Biden administration and every other place in the culture that the left has now firmly gotten their talons in, which, by the by, is most of them. The only way to end this, like I said again, is to overthrow the entire system, to have a revolution. I've said it before, I will repeat it again. YouTube and their censorship be damned. That is story number 2.